Hi, I'm Patricia Grabarek.
And I'm Katina Sawyer, and welcome to the Workr Being podcast. Today, Patricia has an article for us, and I'm very excited to hear what it's about. So do you want to share quickly what you're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, so this article is about a concept called decent work, which is basically work that meets your needs. Means you get enough money, you have some security, prospect for personal development. You know, it's basically like a good job, a decent job, right? You would say it would be a decent job. So it's about decent work and how that leads to better health outcomes.
Awesome. That's very exciting.
Yes.
I really like that concept of decent work, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it, but I feel like that's like near and dear to me, the idea, because that there's been so much more public conversation lately about decent work being something important. And I feel like this is a really timely conversation that people should be thinking about for sure.
Oh, definitely. I mean, we talk about minimum wages all the time. Like that's a big conversation happening right now. And that is definitely tied to this concept of decent work. So I think it is a hot topic. I didn't pick it intentionally thinking it was going to be a hot topic. But as I started reading, I was like, oh man, this is a good paper. I'm very excited about it.
It's awesome. That's very exciting. Well, I am excited to hear about it. In the meantime, how are you doing? How was your day? I know you had an exciting day today.
Yes, I had a pretty big day today. For those listeners that do not know, I started a new job. So, you know, my full-time gig has changed. So yeah, day one. Today was day one. And I feel a little bit tired, but excited and energized. And I think it's going to be quite a wild ride. But I'm feeling good. And I know you also had an exciting day because you just submitted a big paper, right?
Yes, I did. Yeah. So last night at 11:55 p.m., I submitted it, and it was very. I have been working on this paper for 5 years.
Oh my gosh. 5 years. That's so long.
I know.
It's older than Workr being.
I know. So that's why, you know, when I send it in, I'm like so crazed about making sure it's good, because like if it's not good, you have to like start over at a new journal, and I don't want to do that. No. So because it's been under review. The study itself took 3 years to get the data and write up. And then it's been under review now for like almost 2 years. Wow. So I don't want to start another like 2-year long process of this. That would be terrible. So
I'm confident things will go well for you, and we'll be talking about it.
I hope so.
You're going to have to talk about it as an episode one day. So
yeah, if it gets in, we will have an episode on it. It's about hope. So it's a topic that we've talked about before.
We have. It's a good topic. Definitely a good topic. We're talking about hope, psychological capital, all the things we love. Yeah, super exciting.
Yes. So, yes, it's been a big few days for us. I feel like, I don't know. I feel like this weekend we should really like try to take some time to celebrate ourselves or something.
Yeah, definitely. Take like a nice breather and celebrate. I mean, I can't complain. I didn't have like a crazy weekend like you did. I actually took I didn't take a lot of time between jobs, but I did take Friday off, so I had a 3-day weekend.
Wow, what did you do with all that spare time?
So much spare time. And I have to say that like a big chunk of it was setting everything up. Like I got a second desk, and I made like an L shape, so I have like a much bigger working space between my two setup. So I have like my Workr being computer and monitor, and then I have my other company's monitor and computer, and so I have them on each different desks. So I've got like all this space. I'm like super excited about it, but I did end up spending like a good chunk of my weekend like organizing myself, so it wasn't necessarily super relaxing, but it makes me feel better that it's all organized. You know that I love that.
Yes. Organization. Well, and just a space, like we talk about that in our, or like, you know, when we do our retreat and stuff, when, if any of you have ever been to our retreat, or if you plan to come to our retreat, part of what we do is like encourage people to make their space nice. And I was actually doing that, while I was working on my paper, I just feel better about like getting into the mode of like, okay, I'm going to work on this. I'm like, what, I don't know. I feel better when I have like my little diffuser with my oils, and I know you light a candle. Sometimes I also do the same thing. Although the more I've been lighting candles, I feel like I've been like a person that has like accumulated candles and had them as decorations, but not lit them as much. And as I'm lighting them more, I'm realizing some candles really go away faster than others.
They do. Yeah, I have a little diffuser too, and I've been wanting to like start doing that as well because I do like the scent, but because the candles go away so fast.
Yeah.
But I've been scared because Nittany, like, I know that there's some scents you can't use with pets, and I didn't know that when I first got it, and so I had one, and she was kind of like, I could tell she hated it, and then I turned it off, and I haven't really done enough research to figure out exactly what oils I'm allowed to use to not affect her, and given that she's kind of sick, I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna not do it right now, and we'll wait till, one day when I figure it out better. So for now, candles it is.
I don't know about cats, but I know from my experiences that the dog can be near frankincense, cinnamon, or oregano, and any like citrus oil. The dog's fine with all those. I have not tried anything in the like peppermint, eucalyptus-y type realm.
Yeah, I think mint is a bad one.
Yeah.
I don't know about the others, but yeah, I know. And there's like some differences between cats and dogs, and cats apparently are like extra sensitive to it.
Gotcha.
From what I read. So I just need to be really careful, and I'm just not really willing to do all the research to make sure given her situation. So I'm just gonna, I've actually been diffusing it with just water, like using my diffuser because it's almost like a little mini humidifier in the room. So that's what I've been doing instead.
I think that is lovely. Yeah, all the different like little things. And then I got like a clock that plays sounds, and I also have the Headspace soundscapes. So it just depends on how like immersive I want the sounds to be. Like if I really want to be like in the zone of the sounds, I'll use the Headspace one. Because they're like a little bit more whatever, but this other one just sort of sounds like a nice little birds and like a little breeze or whatever, and you can just put it on the background quiet and it just makes like a little nice sound. So I've been trying to like, set up the environment a little bit more. So I do understand that like, getting your space right for your new job would be a big deal.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, I love the sound thing. I love the sounds too, but I think it's also to your point, like the space makes a big difference, and it's also weird to start a job remotely when I've been working remotely. And this job was going to be remote regardless, but when I first started my last job, which is also remote, I flew to the office to meet people and do my onboarding, and I'm assuming that would have happened here too. But it didn't happen. So then I basically just woke up on Monday or today, and I was just like, hey, it's my new job day, but I'm going to the same office that I've been going to for years. So it felt a little weird. And so part of changing the space actually made it feel like I was going to a new job.
That's a good idea. I didn't really think about that, but yeah, that's really interesting. It is strange to start a new job. Brendan did the same thing. He started a new job since we've been pandemic. So he like doesn't know anybody, he's like just met people based on work stuff, but he's never like met them in person, or he doesn't really know anything about anybody. You know what I mean? Because he's just like kind of doing his job, which I'm sure you'll get to know people. He's like so much more introverted. But yeah, I feel like, it is kind of an odd thing to be starting during this time period where you're like, who are you? Hello.
Yeah, definitely. It's weird, but eventually, hopefully, we'll be able to travel again and I can meet people in person.
Yeah.
But I will say that it is a very good job and I'm really excited about it. So kind of moving to the decent work approach. My last job was great too. So I shouldn't say that like I'm suddenly going to decent work. I had decent work and now I'm going to even more decent work, if you will.
You've been decent for a long time.
Trying to figure out a clever transition, but clearly not so great.
You did a good job. I liked it. Okay, yes. So tell us about decent work.
Yes. So this article is brand new. It was published this year in 2021 in the Journal of Vocational Behavior. It's called Decent Work and Physical Health, a Multi-Wave Investigation. And it was written by Duffy, Prieto, Kim, Raque-Bogdan, and Duffy. A lot of people involved. Really interesting study. And so what it looks at this idea of decent work, which we've already talked a little bit about that. But just to kind of give a definition, so the first time decent work was defined, it was defined by the International Labor Organization. And it was, I'll just read the quote. It's opportunities for work that is productive and delivers a fair income, security in the workplace, and social protection for families, better prospects for personal development and social integration, freedom for people to express their concerns, organize and participate in the decisions that affect their lives, and equality of opportunity and treatment for all women and men.
Love it.
Yeah. I would probably...
That sounds delightful.
I don't necessarily like the way that ends with all women and men and maybe not making it
a little
more inclusive, but...
Yeah, I agree. Good call.
But other than that, I like the idea of it, obviously. You know, it's all about having your work meet your needs. So there's a couple of different ways that they've talked about it too. So just to like think about it, the concept a little bit more, they say that work that is decent is defined in part by whether or not your compensation is adequate to give you time for non-work activities. So that means, you know, you only have to have one job instead of 6 jobs to try to make ends meet.
Yep. Yes.
So that's a big piece of it too. And it's all related and tied into this concept, this theory that this paper is all based on, which is called the psychology of working theory. And that's basically the theory that when people get decent work, it leads to more work-related and general well-being because their basic needs are met. So
that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're working in a job that you are, you know, feeling like you can get what you need to live a decent life from one job instead of having to piecemeal together multiple ways of making that come to fruition, your well-being is higher.
Exactly. Yep. And so in this theory, they talk about both life satisfaction and physical health. And they talk about the different types of needs that need to be met. So just to kind of give you a sense as to what they're referring to. So if you have decent work, the types of needs that are met are survival needs. So that's like the super basic stuff, like access to food, shelter, so being able to pay your rent and have a home. Then they talk about social contribution. So it's basically, you know, people have a need to feel like their work is useful, right? You don't want to be doing a job that's just... Most people don't want to be doing a job that's just very rote, like having that need to feel like you're making an impact, and whether it's, you know, socially, societally, or just even within the organization, just wanting to have that need of, you know, having your contribution matter. That's met. And the final piece is that self-determination. So that's really where a person's needs of things like autonomy, feeling competent, and relatedness in the workplace. So having good relationships at work. And we've talked about that concept before, but those are all kind of tied into this broader theory.
That's cool. Yeah. So you need both economic and social characteristics of the job to support kind of your wellness.
Exactly. Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
Awesome. That makes sense.
Yeah. So this is, this study, what it really looks at is it wants to understand how decent work impacts health. Specifically, they looked at general health. So just generally how healthy, you are. The types of questions around general health are, you know, would you say, basically just would you say your health is poor, fair, good, very good, excellent, and then comparing your health to other people your age, if you think your physical health is better or worse than the people your age. So they looked at general health. They looked at health symptoms. So things like basically just checking the box of whether or not you had these symptoms in the past month. Then it's things like back pain, shortness of breath, trouble sleeping, chest pain. And then they also looked at healthy behaviors. So basically seeing if having decent work impacts whether or not people do things that are good for them, like eating fruit or exercising for at least 30 minutes, each day or whatever that looks like. So they had a bunch of questions on that too. So those are the three kind of outcomes that they're trying to predict that they want to see if decent work impacts.
And I would imagine that if in order to make ends meet financially, you have to work 3 different jobs, which was the case. And I remember this so clearly because our students just had no idea. When I worked at Villanova, many of the staff there that clean the offices and classrooms leave their jobs when Villanova closes and go to overnight jobs where they clean office buildings overnight, or they would have other types of overnight work that they would do, and they would basically be getting like a few hours of sleep a night and then come back into Villanova and clean. And I remember telling our students that, when we have these conversations about wages, or we have conversations about people who qualify for government assistance, for example, like most of those individuals are working. It's just that they're not making enough when they're working to pay their bills in a way that's reasonable to live in today's economy. And so I think that, it would be very unlikely if you're working in if you're working in 3 jobs to try to make ends meet, that you're going to come home and be like, you know what, I think I'm going to go exercise for 30 minutes. Like, that's very unlikely, right? So people don't have time to do basic health behaviors when their life is basically overtaken by the need to work because of the economics associated with the type of job they do.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I can't even imagine exercising when I have like an exhausting 8 hours of work.
Right. Exactly.
It's sometimes you're just like, oh, it's been such a long day. I can't possibly. And then if you have to work 2 jobs, like, it's a lot. And the same goes with healthy eating. If you don't have the time to prepare good meals for yourself or go to the grocery store, also the wages to pay for fresh foods, we know that those are more expensive. Then people are not going to be participating in those behaviors. So those are the 3 main health outcomes they looked at. Cool. So the things to know about the methods of the study is they had people take 3 different surveys over a 2-month period. So the first survey was really around whether or not this person has decent work. So there's a specific scale, it's called the decent work scale, that they just measured whether or not people had 5 of these decent work components. So the components that are included are safe working conditions, access to health care, adequate compensation, free time for rest, and then an organizational and societal value match. So matching your values too.
Okay, cool.
So they measured those. And then in time 2, they asked people if their survival needs were met. So they specifically were looking at survival needs in this study. So that includes questions like, my work allows me to have the resources to provide nutritious food for myself and my family. My work allows me to have the resources to pay for utilities, such as water, heating, and electric on time. So that's about the survival needs. And then the second thing they measured during that second wave of questions was about work fatigue. So just checking in to see if people are fatigued by their work, both physically, mentally, and also emotionally. So asking questions like, in the last month, did they feel physically drained at the end of the workday, feel mentally worn out, want to emotionally shut down, things like that.
Yeah.
So that was in time 2. So if you're kind of putting this together, what they're looking at is seeing, does decent work impact survival needs and their work fatigue? And then do those things then impact health?
Gotcha.
Okay, so that's kind of the big model, if you will.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm curious to hear what they find. It's interesting that, we're thinking about not just, the impact of the wages itself, but also the impact on health, because as we talked about last week, the links between health and wealth are very strong, but also individuals that find themselves in these jobs may be doing more physical labor as part of the job, because that, more jobs like that fall into this category. But also we talked last week about emotional labor, and you have more emotional labor when you are in a job that requires you to deal with the public more frequently, or, in which people express dissatisfaction or conflict towards you, which could be more likely to happen in jobs that people perceive as being lower status. So there could be a lot of different things that are compounding, but I think it's interesting that it's not looking just at your access to material stuff, but also your health from a variety of aspects, because I would imagine that like having these kinds of jobs is comorbid with other types of things that make jobs difficult.
Yeah, 100%. And that is what they find. So,
okay, cool.
Spoiler alert, if we're going to the findings, they found that decent work. So if you have decent work, you're less likely to experience work fatigue, which makes sense, right? You're more likely to, have time to rest, recover, and therefore you're not as exhausted.
Yeah.
Decent work was also related to survival needs. So if you had decent work, you can pay for food, you can make sure that the bills are paid, so your utilities are on, all that good stuff. So basically, that's already a huge finding, right? Just having decent work can really help you.
Yeah.
Decent work also directly affected physical health. So they, anticipated that you have to, like, if that leads to more work fatigue, then it leads to lower physical health, which it did, but it also was directly impacting it. So like just from the nerd perspective, there are like two ways that decent work impacts your physical health, which is that overall health, the questions that are basically like, my health is pretty good or it's not. And compared to other people my age, if it's good or not, just having decent work means you're more likely to feel like your physical health is good.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's like huge, right? Just having this work can really lead to that important outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. Did they talk at all about the amount of physical activity that's on the job wearing on people over time? Or did they not ask questions about how much physical labor people did on the job?
They did not. They did ask questions about, physical activity just from a healthy behaviors perspective, but not on the job necessarily.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I'd be curious to see, just because, it's not a job that didn't have decent work, but, my dad was a stonemason when we were growing up, and the amount of physical, like if you were somebody who was working as like an assistant to a stonemason, for example, that would probably fall into the category of people who are making potentially less than a living wage. And so that work is so physically intensive that over time it really, or jobs where you're like on your feet all day, cleaning, like, things like that, where you have a strong physical component to your job might compound over time to create more health issues as well. And like office jobs while sitting is also a health risk. It's not the same as like constantly straining your body in those ways.
Yeah, that's a really good point. They did look at things like social class and income to control for that type of stuff, but they did not look at the physical labor side, which I think would be a great extension to this study.
Yeah, that's cool.
Is figuring that out. Yeah. But yeah, so decent work, again, leads to lower work fatigue, higher attainment of survival needs, and better physical health. And then if you look kind of further into the pathways here, when you have better work, more decent work, and then you have lower work fatigue, that actually also leads to not only lower or better health, but it also leads to fewer health symptoms. So the things where people are able to indicate how often they maybe had a back pain during the month, or chest pain or stomach issues or anything like that. So work fatigue basically causes health symptoms and makes you feel worse. And so with decent work, you're able to overcome that work fatigue, and therefore you're able to help reduce those symptoms.
Gotcha. That's really interesting. So there is something to the idea that whatever is happening on these jobs, it's more tiring.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep.
And that's what's
Exactly.
sort of explaining this.
Yep, exactly. And then the final piece, but work fatigue was not related at all to healthy behaviors, but survival needs were. So if you have a decent job that meets your needs, aka it helps you pay for the things you need, you're much more
Right.
likely to participate in those healthy behaviors. So now you have more time, so you can exercise, you can go to the grocery
Yeah.
store, get fresh foods, all of that. So there's like a very important relationship there where you have to have that decent work to then meet your survival needs, which then leads you to do more of these health behaviors.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. So basically, the argument would be that if we really want, as I'm sure people would vocalize support for, if we really want to have a world where people have an equal opportunity at being healthy and being able to not only experience greater health, which I'm sure is linked to like longevity and things like that, but also be able to take steps to support their own health, that we need to all be in the business of trying to understand how to make jobs more decent.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, those are the big takeaways, basically what you just described. In the study, they talked about how, there's a couple of things that workplaces need to do. So, one, it's how can you provide decent work to reduce things like work fatigue? But then also, how can you think about the structure of your jobs and make sure that your decent work is also helping improve the survival needs, right? So thinking about the workplace conditions, which means thinking about pay in particular, pay, stability, all of those things so that people can get their needs met in that one job and not have to do a million jobs to try to make ends meet and then really have a bad impact on their overall health. And if you think about it, this study did not look at performance. But if you have to make an argument to a very performance-driven organization, if your employees are just not functioning well, they can't make ends meet, they're not able to do any of the things to take care of their health, they're eventually going to have severe health issues, which means they're not going to be able to work for you anymore. So that's also an important piece to think about too.
Yeah, and just thinking about, a lot of people say they're very family focused and family oriented, but that doesn't mean just being family focused and family oriented on your own family. It means caring about the health and well-being of all kinds of families and looking outside your own. And I think that if people are thinking about it that way, instead of thinking about it just around their own family, it would become clear that if we want to support healthy, happy families, we need to find a way to make people's jobs actually align with that goal. Which we are not currently doing for a large percentage of families. That, it's not right that you should have to work multiple jobs in order to be able to make ends meet because of the type of job that you do. And also, a lot of the jobs that we're talking about are jobs that during the COVID-19 pandemic, we were like, these are essential workers. Thank you for doing these jobs that we need to keep things going and get food to people and deliveries and, make sure that hospitals are clean. And, there's all kinds of folks that are in this boat that are doing these jobs that we consider essential, but yet we don't consider them essential enough to actually allow them to make a living wage doing them.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's such a shame to put all these messages out there about how much we care about essential workers, but then not actually care about essential workers, since we don't want to give them decent work. And I think this study, I mean, it couldn't come at a better time, in my opinion, because of this conversation around essential work. I know that there are grocery stores in Southern California, 2 of them, that have closed a couple of locations because in Southern California, you have to now, or in California, I think in general, there's like I forgot what they're calling it, like hero pay or something, some silly name, but it's like $4 an hour more or something like that people need to pay these essential workers right now. And there are grocery stores that have literally just like, we're going to close instead of pay them. And yet I was reading this article that was talking about how those same grocery stores have actually hit higher profit numbers than they've have in the past 10 years. And yet they're going to close the stores. So I think we just need to, as a society in general, reevaluate what matters to us, and if decent work is something that we need to do to address health issues, health concerns, and make sure that our employees are able to, live a life outside of work. I think we really need to address things like that, like minimum wage, pay, all the good stuff.
I completely agree. And I don't want to go too far afield here in terms of talking about this. But if anyone's interested in this topic, there's a group of researchers. I know one of them is Michael Norton, who's in Harvard Business School. And I used to, when I taught a class on psychology of gender, because we just had more time to unpack different aspects of things, do a whole lecture on this using his data, but I don't do it in my class anymore because my class has a different focus. But everyone always really liked this lecture, which basically asked a very large representative sample of people in America from all different political parties all across the spectrum what they think the wage gap should be between CEOs and the average employee. So they asked them, like, ideally, how much of a gap do you think there should be? And then they said, how much do you think a CEO of a company, how much longer do you think a CEO of a company and their family should live than the average employee and their family? And so they use this data based on the connection between health and wealth to actually demonstrate what this looks like. And what they found was that there were differences in political party in terms of how much the ratio should be between CEO and average employee. And there were differences in political party in terms of how much longer they think people should live if they're rich versus if they're poor. But the differences are like pretty small. And the reality of how many times the CEO pay is of the average employee pay, and the stark difference between the average employee's lifespan and someone who has more wealth's lifespan, nobody actually wants that. So nobody reported that the current state today is actually what they want. Everybody reported that they want a smaller gap than what actually is, and that they want health and wealth to be much less related than they actually are. But the problem is that nobody's aware of the actual current state of things. Mm-hmm. So people like think that they're like when people are like, we need more of this, like, or they fight to cut back on those kinds of things. There's a lack of recognition that we're already so far afield from what anybody wants that, like, we're not even arguing over anything. We're actually all should be trying to argue to decrease the gap and provide better healthcare, because actually that's what everybody wants. But it's a really fascinating set of studies that basically show that it's just that nobody really knows what's actually happening that's causing like all of this.
That doesn't surprise me. I feel like that's pretty, I mean, no one, I think even the most progressive people probably have no idea as to how big the gap actually is, because we don't really look at those numbers. We're not really confronted with the numbers that often. So I think, I don't know. I think that's an important note. I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's a really good indicator that it's not just about like political preference or values or what have you. I think generally speaking, everybody wants people to be able to live healthy, long lives. So just thinking about how we can do that effectively, how we can make jobs better so that everyone can do it. And, I often hear people say things like, well, then those people should just start working, get an education or do whatever and move to a different type of job. But then who's going to do the job that they're in currently?
That job? Yeah. And it's not easy to do that either. People completely underestimate the barriers that are associated with doing that.
Completely.
But
But
Yeah,
they still have
I
to think
agree
about
with
yeah, because you still have to think about who is going to do that job. Like, you still need someone at your grocery store to stock the
Right.
shelves. Like, you're not going to just magically have them stocked. I mean, maybe one day robots will do it, but that's not happening right now.
Right.
Yeah, so I think we just need to be a little bit more cognizant of the situation that people are in. And I think everyone can agree that we want people to be able to have decent jobs. And so that means, figuring out what that looks like. I think we can find that middle ground. Hopefully organizations can start making some changes into this. And I think this type of study is like a good first step for people to really open their eyes and see, okay, well, what happens if we don't have decent work?
Yeah.
So I thought it was a great study.
I'm really happy that you brought it up. It's a really great topic, super important. And I know right now there's a push to raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. There's a lot of, folks who are on board with that. And, we've been working with this like local pizza, very quickly growing local pizza company around in the DC area. That's now also in New York and Pennsylvania and whatever, but they've been really big in the fight for $15 minimum wage. And the interesting thing is that they have the highest profit margins of any pizza store like around. So they're making a lot more money than everyone else, and they're paying their employees, and they all have health care. And they're like, look, like, maybe you're not making money because your pizza sucks.
Might be one piece.
Yeah. And so they're kind of like, why don't you think about how to do what you do better so you can pay people better, instead of just saying it's impossible to do? Like, it's not impossible to do. So it's been cool.
Yeah, I mean, just think about that though. What you just said, their pizza sucks. Why does their pizza suck? Their people are exhausted and aren't able to make their pizza, or they don't.
And the ingredients
care.
are like not even.
Yes,
that's a whole other thing we could get into. They don't even have to publish the ingredients because pizza is not a food by law.
What? Okay, I don't want to talk about that. That is freaking me out. Ew, no. I don't like that.
Big pizza. I've been learning so much about big pizza, and it's really scary. I'm like, I'm never eating that again. Like, it's like a pizza is a meal, and you don't have to publish nutrition facts or ingredients apparently for a meal, only for something that's an individual serving. It's all crazy. So like nobody knows what's even in there, and you don't know what the nutrition facts are. Like, you cannot find them. You won't find them.
Okay. So, well, it sounds like Big Pizza has a lot of other problems.
Clearly not caring about health on many directions and angles.
Oh, I just never thought we'd be talking about Big Pizza.
No, like me either. I never thought I would learn so much about Big Pizza, but I'm all in. I know a lot about Big Pizza now.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, I want to get into the ingredients part. I was going to just say that employees that, are not being paid enough, or maybe have to have multiple jobs, like, I'm assuming they're coming in exhausted. Maybe they don't even care as much about the job because they have other things to worry about. This is just they show up and do what they have to do. Right. And therefore they're not going to put the love into the nasty ingredients, but hopefully good ingredients. But it's like, what's a special ingredient in your cake, right? You always say, oh, love. Well, you need your employees to like sort of like what they're doing so they can make a better product too.
Yeah, got to put some love in there, and maybe it'll cancel out sawdust or whatever else is in there. I'm not sure, but yep. But anyway, well, I'm really glad you read this. I think it's super important. I'm glad that we all had an opportunity to think about these things. And if you are a person who has the power to rethink jobs to be decent, people's health is on the line. People's families are on the line. People's ability to like not fall into poverty, to be able to pay their bills, and who are working hard and deserve to at least be able to make ends meet and have time to go for a run every now and again. That should be a pretty low bar for us to achieve as a society for people that we depend on all the time. So I'm really glad that you found this article. It's super important, and thank you.
Yeah, of course. We'd love to hear from all of our listeners too. If you have any thoughts, questions, examples, we'd love to hear. So you can always find us on our website, which is workrbeing.com. You can email us at contact@workrbeing.com. And you can also find us on social. So we're on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook at Workr. And finally, we just wanted to remind you all that we have our courses online as well. So if you're dealing with a lot of stress, maybe you aren't in a position to make work more decent, but want some help on how to reduce some of your stress, you can find our free class, and she'll be linked in the show notes. Thanks so much for listening. The Workr podcast is hosted by us, Patricia Grabarek
and Katina Sawyer, and produced by Allie Johnson.